Hey there, future diplomats and policymakers. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a look at current events that are crucial for your UPSC journey.
Absolutely.
And today,
Yeah.
we are strapping in for a flight through the
Ooh.
India-UAE aviation corridor.
Nice.
We've got a fantastic report from TH that's packed with insights. And trust me, this isn't just about planes.
No.
This is about economic growth, international relations, and maybe even your next vacation.
That's right.
Get ready for some serious mains essay material.
Yeah. You know what's so fascinating about this report is that it goes beyond just airports and flight routes. It really gets into how India's booming aviation sector reflects the country's overall progress and its growing influence on the world stage.
Absolutely. And speaking of booming, the report highlights a pretty mind-blowing stat.
Okay.
India is now the world's third largest domestic aviation market. That's huge.
Yeah.
But what does that mean for everyday Indians, and why should a UPSC aspirant care?
That's a great question. Think about it this way. This growth isn't just happening in big cities.
Right.
The government's UDAN scheme, which aims to connect smaller towns by air, is a game changer.
Okay.
It means more Indians have access to affordable air travel, which opens up opportunities for education jobs and even healthcare.
Wow.
This directly ties into the UPSC's focus on inclusive growth and reducing regional disparities.
Yes.
Themes you'll often see in essay questions.
Okay, so we've got a rapidly growing aviation sector within India. Now let's add the UAE to the mix.
Okay.
The report mentions over 1,100 flights a week between the two countries. Clearly, there's strong demand for travel in both directions, but there's a catch.
Right. The demand is outpacing the supply.
Okay.
The report calls out these things called bilateral air service agreements.
Right.
Basically, these are like treaties that determine how many flights can operate between two countries.
Okay.
And these agreements are currently limiting how many flights Indian and UAE airlines can offer.
So that sounds like a recipe for expensive tickets.
It can be, yeah.
So I'm curious, what are the implications of this limited air capacity? Does it impact more than just ticket prices?
Absolutely. When you have restricted competition, it can stifle innovation and affect the quality of service provided by airlines. And for a future policymaker, this raises some key questions. How can we ensure fair pricing for passengers?
Right.
How do we encourage airlines to improve their services and offer more competitive options?
Yeah.
This is all relevant to areas like economic policy and consumer protection, which are key topics for the UPSC.
It's fascinating how this deep dive is revealing all these interconnected layers. We've got economic factors, policy considerations, international relations. It's a perfect example of how seemingly niche topics can become incredibly relevant for the UPSC exam.
Exactly. And speaking of challenges, the report doesn't shy away from highlighting those either.
Okay.
Airport congestion, especially in major hubs like Delhi and Mumbai, is a major concern.
Right.
Then there are restrictive policies that are adding to the pressure. And of course, those high airfares we talked about, they're a real barrier for many travelers.
So it's not all smooth flying, that's for sure. But I'm curious, what are some of the opportunities that the report highlights? Because it can't all be doom and gloom, right?
Of course not. One of the most exciting aspects is the potential for collaboration between India and the UAE.
Okay.
The UAE has built a world-class aviation sector, and they've got expertise in areas like airport management, logistics, and training programs. Think about Dubai's incredible cargo hub, for instance.
Right.
India could learn a lot from their model as it seeks to become a global player in aviation.
That's a great point. It sounds like there's a real opportunity for knowledge transfer and joint initiatives. And speaking of ambitious projects, the report mentions the Navi Mumbai Airport. That's a mega project aimed at easing congestion in the Mumbai region. But is it enough to meet the growing demand?
That's a question that policymakers are grappling with right now.
Yeah.
It highlights the importance of infrastructure planning and investment, which is another key area for the UPSC.
Sure.
Understanding the scale of projects like this, the reasoning behind them, and the potential challenges they face.
Yeah. Right.
It's all relevant to your exam preparation.
It's like a real-world case study for UPSC aspirants.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already, but let's zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture. What's the long-term vision for India's aviation industry?
The report hints at something truly ambitious: India's potential to become a global aviation hub on par with the likes of Singapore and Dubai.
Now that's a vision.
Yeah.
But what would it take for India to achieve that? I mean, it's not just about building bigger airports, right?
You're absolutely right. It requires a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
We need sustained investment in infrastructure, consistent policy reforms that encourage competition and innovation, and a highly skilled workforce. This is where we can circle back to the UAE and their expertise in areas like aviation training.
So it's about more than just planes and airports. It's about creating a whole ecosystem that supports growth and positions India as a leader in the global aviation landscape. But before we delve further into that, let's take a quick pause. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about India's potential to become a global aviation hub. It's a bold vision, but as we've seen, there are some serious challenges to overcome. So let's shift gears and explore some potential solutions. The report hints at a few key areas where India can really step up its game. What are your thoughts?
Well, we can't talk about solutions without addressing the elephant in the room, or should I say, the crowded tarmac airport congestion is a major bottleneck, especially in those mega hubs like Delhi and Mumbai.
And we talked about the Navi Mumbai airport as a step in the right direction. But is building new airports the only answer?
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle for sure, but think of it like this. You wouldn't just build more lanes on a highway to solve traffic jams, would you? You'd also look at optimizing traffic flow, improving signaling systems, and maybe even incentivizing people to use public transport. The same applies to aviation, along with new airports. We need to modernize air traffic management systems, optimize runway utilization, and even streamline things like ground handling and baggage processing.
That makes a lot of sense. A multi-pronged approach is needed, not just a band-aid solution. But what about those bilateral agreements we discussed earlier? Those seem to be putting a real constraint on growth.
You're absolutely right. Those restrictive air service agreements are a key area for reform. The report suggests exploring a more liberalized approach, perhaps even moving towards what are called open skies agreements.
Now, for our UPSC folks who might not be familiar with the ins and outs of aviation policy, could you break down what open skies agreements actually entail?
Sure, imagine you're planning a road trip, but you're only allowed to drive on certain roads, and at certain times that's kind of what it's like for airlines. Under the current agreements, open skies agreements are like removing those restrictions, allowing airlines greater freedom to choose routes, set their own fares, and even form partnerships with other airlines. It's about fostering healthy competition, which ideally leads to lower prices, more choices for passengers, and better connectivity overall.
That sounds like a win-win situation. But I'm curious, wouldn't opening up the skies pose a risk to Indian airlines, especially in the face of competition from established international carriers?
That's a valid concern, and it's something policymakers would need to carefully consider. There might be some initial challenges, but in the long run, healthy competition could actually push Indian airlines to become more efficient, innovative, and customer-focused. The key is to strike a balance to liberalize while also providing necessary support for the growth and development of the domestic aviation industry.
So it's about creating a level playing field where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And it's not just about the airlines themselves, right? We also need a skilled workforce to support this growing sector.
Absolutely. As the demand for air travel continues to soar, India needs a steady supply of qualified pilots, engineers, air traffic controllers, ground staff. The list goes on. And this is where the UAE's experience can be incredibly valuable. They've invested heavily in world-class aviation training institutions.
You're referring to those collaborative training programs we talked about earlier, right?
Exactly. India can learn from the UAE's best practices, develop joint training programs, and create a pipeline of skilled professionals ready to meet the demands of this booming industry. This kind of collaboration would not only address the skills gap, but also strengthen the ties between the two countries.
It's fascinating how this deep dive is uncovering these multifaceted connections between economic growth, international cooperation, and even education and skills development. It's a perfect example of how seemingly separate issues are actually intertwined.
And that's a key takeaway for UPSC aspirants. The exam often tests your ability to see those connections, to analyze issues from multiple perspectives, and to synthesize information from different areas.
So it's not just about memorizing facts and figures. It's about developing a holistic understanding of how things work in the real world. Okay, we've talked about infrastructure upgrades, policy reforms, and workforce development, but let's not forget about the sustainability aspect with all this growth in aviation. How can India ensure that it's done in an environmentally responsible way?
That's a crucial point. The UPSC is increasingly focusing on sustainable development, and the aviation sector is no exception. Think about fuel efficiency, noise, pollution, mitigation, and even exploring alternative fuels. These are areas where India can take a leadership role and showcase its commitment to a greener future.
So it's about striking a balance between economic growth and environmental responsibility. And this brings us back to that larger vision. India is a global aviation hub. What would it take to achieve this goal while also prioritizing sustainability?
It requires a long-term strategy that integrates environmental considerations into every aspect of the aviation sector, from investing in fuel-efficient aircraft and developing sustainable aviation fuels to promoting green airports and implementing stricter emission standards. It's about making sustainability a core principle, not an afterthought.
So it's about demonstrating that India's aviation ambitions go hand in hand with its commitment to a sustainable future. That's a powerful message to send on the global stage. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to our UPSC aspirants. What are some key takeaways they can apply to their exam preparation?
This topic is a goldmine for UPSC preparation because it touches upon so many themes that are relevant to the syllabus. We've got economic development, infrastructure planning, international relations, environmental sustainability. It's all here. But remember, it's not just about regurgitating facts. It's about understanding the complexities, analyzing the challenges, and coming up with thoughtful solutions.
And it's about connecting the dots, seeing how different sectors and issues are interconnected, just like we've done in this deep dive.
Exactly. And don't forget to stay updated on current events related to the aviation sector. The UPSC loves to test your knowledge of recent developments, so make sure you're following the news and keeping track of key policy announcements.
All right, folks, we've covered a lot of ground today, but this is just the beginning of your exploration. We encourage you to delve deeper into this topic, research further, and form your own informed opinions. And if you found this deep dive helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your fellow UPSC warriors. Until next time, happy studying. And a big thank you to TH for providing the insightful report that fueled today's discussion. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been soaring through this India-UAE aviation corridor, exploring its complexities and its potential.
Right.
Now, as we prepare for landing, let's highlight some key takeaways for our UPSC aspirants. Those future policymakers who will be shaping India's aviation landscape.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has.
We've seen how this topic goes beyond just planes and airports. It's a microcosm of India's economic ambitions, its diplomatic strategies, and its place in the globalized world.
Exactly. And what's great about this topic for UPSC preparation is that it intersects with so many different areas of the syllabus. We've talked about infrastructure economics, international relations, even environmental sustainability.
Yeah.
It's like a one-stop shop for essay topics and current affairs analysis.
For instance, remember the UDAN scheme we discussed?
Yeah.
It's a prime example of how the government is trying to promote inclusive growth by connecting smaller towns to the aviation network. This directly addresses regional disparities, a key concern for policymakers, and a frequent theme in UPSC exams.
Right, and let's not forget the strategic partnership between India and the UAE. It's a relationship built on energy, security, trade, and cultural exchange. UPSC loves to test your understanding of these interconnected dynamics, and aviation is a major piece of that puzzle.
Absolutely. The sheer volume of air traffic between the two countries highlights the strength of this partnership. And as India aims to become a global aviation hub, the UAE's experience and expertise become even more valuable.
But as we've seen, there are challenges along the way. Those restrictive bilateral agreements, for example, highlight the complexities of international negotiations.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act between protecting national interests and fostering global cooperation, something that future policymakers will have to navigate.
Those agreements are a great example of how seemingly technical details can have significant economic and political implications. Understanding these nuances is crucial for crafting effective policies.
And don't forget about the environmental aspect. As aviation grows, so does its carbon footprint. The UPSC is increasingly focused on sustainable development. So it's important to consider how India can balance its aviation ambitions with its environmental commitments.
This is where innovation comes in. Think about fuel-efficient aircraft, sustainable aviation fuels, and even the concept of green airports. These are all areas where India can take a leadership role on the global stage.
So for our UPSC aspirants, we urge you to delve deeper into these aspects. Go beyond the headlines, research different perspectives, and think critically about the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for India's aviation sector.
Remember, the UPSC isn't just about rote learning.
Right.
It's about applying your knowledge, analyzing information, and forming well-reasoned arguments. This deep dive has given you a framework for understanding a complex issue. Now it's up to you to build upon it.
Exactly. Use this knowledge as a springboard for further research. Stay updated on current events, analyze policy decisions, and think about the long-term implications for India's role in the global aviation landscape.
And most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and form your own opinions. That's the mark of a true policymaker.
All right, folks, we've reached the end of our deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and informative. If you have any further questions or want to explore specific aspects in more detail, drop a comment below. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your fellow UPSC Astroants. Until next time, happy studying, and a big thank you to TCH for providing the insightful report that fueled today's discussion.